Hey folks, welcome back to Game Geeks. I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Today's episode we are talking about Demon Hunters, a Comedy of Terrors, which is the newest version of a Demon Hunters role-playing game. Now this is no longer produced by Margaret Weis Productions. They did the original version, which was a full Cortex game back in the 2000 and single numbers. That was a perfectly fine game, and what it did is it's an adaptation of a pair of movies that Dead Gentleman Productions, an organization that rose out of Pacific Lutheran University, they did sort of like fan-made home movies about an organization called the Brotherhood of the Celestial Torch, which is divinely endowed to fight the forces of evil and the forces of darkness. And that's all well and good. The first movie is quite a lot of fun. The second movie, Demon Hunters Dead Camper Lake, I find to be slightly superior just because they had a broader scope, they had more time, and they seemed like they had a lot more fun with making it. Well, that lay fallow for a while. Occasional snippets would pop up. There's a webcomic now of Demon Hunters, which you can follow the continuing adventures of our main characters. And finally, there's this newest version of the role-playing game, A Comedy of Terrors. I'll be perfectly honest up front. I'm the kind of guy who likes to give you the punchline to the joke before the joke itself. This is probably one of my favorite books I read in 2015. This, if not my favorite book. It is a hoot to read. It is brilliantly written, everything written in a very parodical, tongue-in-cheek tone. And the rules that have been put together for this by Cam Banks, formerly of Margaret Weis Productions, are a brilliant combination of Cortex and Fate Accelerated. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Characters themselves are defined by aspects. So your characters have a set of aspects that define them. They are defined by approaches as well. The approaches are how your character handles situations. They're sort of a combination of some basic skills and your stats. The approaches, and for those of you who know Fate Accelerated will recognize these right away, are clever, careful, flashy, forceful, quick, and sneaky. And these are rated as a die code, no longer a +1, +2, -1, whatever. These are a die code now that range from a D10 down to a D4. Instead of fate dice, you have faith dice, which use a D6 or a reroll, depending on which you want to use, but come as a taggable aspect. There are also different types of dice you can use that put dice into the GM's pile, the demon dice. Now, every one of my players, bastards that they are, have played in games where this is an option, and those guys have never, ever, ever put dice or chips or anything into my hands. They will go to ignoble death before they give me the option to bone them any further. And you know which players you are, I'm looking right at you. I think that's true of a lot of player characters because there's a slightly adversarial point of view that still holds in role-playing where it's us against the GM. A lot of more recent Fate and other games, such as the story games, kind of go against that, but at its heart, a lot of us are still of the old Dungeons & Dragons Tomb of Horrors mindset of it's us versus the GM. Next up are stunts. Now the stunts sort of define your specific ability to modify those approaches as you see fit for your character. What they essentially do is they allow you to either break rules or give you a situational bonus, those sorts of things. Again, for those of us who understand Fate, we know what we're talking about with that. The second piece of this that makes it feel like Fate got really freaky with Cortex one day and this is their offspring are your disciplines. These are very broad categorized skills. Now these are combat and tactics, covert ops, mystic arts, research and development, and social engineering. Again, rated as a die code rather than as a specific number. Now you can have variations in this if you want a weird character. If you want a weird character, sorry, Freudian slip there. For example, a weird critter. Werewolf would be the classic example, but I've seen someone who wants to play a weird crocodile, a more popular option these days. Weird possum, etc. Also, vampire, the master of the mystic arts, those sorts of things would fit in there as well. You would obviously lose one of these approaches then because you have a focus specialization in that particular weird thing. Now, the rest of this, how the Fate dice have turned into faith dice. Those are also no longer a static +2 or a reroll. Now it's an additional D6 or a reroll. But you still have to have the same rules for using them, invoking an aspect, that sort of thing. So overall, the character development in this is very nicely done because between your approaches, your disciplines, your stunts, etc., those are really nice in developing a slightly more gamey, if you will, version of a player character than you would normally see in Fate. Then, the rest of it are specific examples of things that weird creatures can do, magic and how it works, weird technology, demonology 101, that sort of thing. One of the other particularly beautiful things about this book is the fact that it is written in such a beautifully comedic tone. There's not a bit of this that takes itself way too seriously. For example, there's a character in here whose name is Tree. Now, Tree is an interdimensional being that fell through a mystic vortex and is now a demon-fighting tree. Folks, it's a fir. It's a Douglas fir, but it's a tree. And so it's a tree that fights demons on your side. Now, Tree has a slightly different set of skills associated with it. For example, its disciplines include stealth, espionage, charisma, defense against fire, and monogamy. I don't think I've ever been in a game where monogamy is a stat. That gives you the idea of the sort of brilliant but weird geniuses that developed this game work with. Now, I'll tell you right up front, I'm a huge fan of the property. I'm a huge fan of these guys. I love them dearly. I ran into a couple of them at Gen Con a couple years ago, and I was embarrassed. A friend of mine said, "Did I squee?" I said, "No, I starfired." I went absolutely berserk talking about how great these guys were. What I didn't know is that this is a game that I've been looking for. It's one that I didn't know I had because I have shoehorned comedic supernatural horror games like this into different systems before. I've played an absolutely brilliant one with my players that was, and it was they made it brilliant, not me, which was a variation of Spook House. Now, if you've played Nocturne or the first Blair Witch computer game that came out around the time of the movies, Rust and Parr, you'll know that Spook House is an organization that was founded by Teddy Roosevelt when he was charging up San Juan Hill and killed himself a werewolf. Well, that Spook House game, which included a weird dog, Elvis as the head of the chapter, the mystic voodoo queen was actually a drag queen from New Orleans, HR was a frisky invisible person, and Archives was run by a mummy who really didn't like you. This could be done brilliantly through this game. No question about it whatsoever. I heartily endorse this game. If you are looking for a game about supernatural characters, if you're looking for a game with a heavy dose of sarcasm and humor, some of the horror left in there, this is it, and you absolutely cannot go wrong. I give this my highest recommendation. Like I said, it's probably my favorite game of 2015. For Game Geeks, I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Good day and good gaming.